Perfect. So before we start, a few housekeeping things. Please keep your microphone on mute until the Q&A session when you'll have questions to ask. And Gertrude will first talk about her journey a little bit and then about the topic for today's session. And then after that, I'm going to open the floor for Q&A. So please raise your hands during the Q&A so that it's easier for me to see how, in what order people have raised their hands, and I can make sure that people get a chance to ask their questions. Besides that, you're welcome to keep your video on, off, however it's convenient for you. And it's going to be a very interactive session. I encourage you to ask your questions to Gertrude while you have the opportunity to do so. Besides that, I will introduce our guest now, Dr. Gertrude Nonterah, who is a medical communications professional. She graduated from Lewis Katz Temple University School of Medicine with a PhD in microbiology and immunology in 2015. She is also the founder of the BOLD PhD and helps graduate students and PhDs in transitioning to a career outside the academia. Gertrude's journey after PhD has been really fascinating, and I will now give it to her to share her journey and talk to us about how you could build your profile for an effective EB2 NIW process. Thank you, Gertrude, so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate you spending this time. And I'll let you start your talk today. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Ayantka, for hosting me. I know Aditi is not able to be here, but thank you all also for coming, because if you didn't show up, then we would not be speaking to anybody. So as I said, my name is Gertrude Nonterah. I have a PhD in microbiology and immunology, and I currently work as a scientific content specialist at Thermo Fisher Scientific in Carlsbad, California. Now, to be honest with you, until I graduated, well, let me take that back. I remember when I was at Temple School of Medicine, we had a few immigration lawyers come talk to us international students. And they gave us various options for working within the United States, right? And so a few of those included, of course, going the OPT route to get your OPT, optional practical training. For those of you that are international students in the US, you already know about this. Another way was to try to get a company to sponsor you for an H-1B, or you could sponsor yourself. And actually, they didn't even talk about self-sponsorship opportunities that I'm going to talk about, but they talked about the H-1B, they talked about OPT, then I remember them talking about the O visa. And the EB1 and EB2 wasn't even something they really touched on. So I remember going, finishing my PhD and trying to figure out, okay, so what am I going to do? I got my OPT. Of course, if you're a STEM professional, you get a 2-year extension at the time. I don't know if they still give that. But this was back in 2015, so 8 years ago. And as I came in the middle of my OPT, one of my friends who had also just finished his PhD was like, hey, Gertrude, I just applied for this thing called the EB2 National Interest Waiver. You should try it out, right? And so he sent me all the information. He actually had to come for a meeting here in the San Diego area. So when he came, he gave me that information. I was like, okay, let me try it. Couldn't hurt anything. I applied for it and it worked out. And so here we are today. So that's the short version of the story. Now, let me kind of give you what was important in the application process, because I think this is where a lot of people sometimes are like, okay, so what exactly do I do? Before I jump into that though, I want to say that a lot of people, I have a video series on the BOLD PhD YouTube channel where I share my experiences going through the EB2 process. And I share everything that I know, but I always have people jump into my email or jump into my LinkedIn inbox and be like, can you give me more information? I'm like, no, the information is what I've given you. And most of the time I realize that the feeling behind that message is, I'm afraid to do this. Can you assure me that it's going to work? And the reality is that I cannot assure you because I am not the US government, right? But what I can tell you, what you can do to put yourself in a better position to have your case potentially approved. Okay, so that's the first thing I want to say. Don't be afraid. Just make sure you have all the technical documents, everything I'm going to share with you today. Just make sure you have that lined up and ready to go when you're ready to apply for this opportunity. Now, I didn't apply for the employment-based one category because at the time, and again, this is going back to 2015, 2016, 2017, at the time, in my mind, the people that applied for EB1 visas were like super geniuses, were the people who had Oscars and Grammys and Nobel Prizes. This was what was in my mind. So the next level below that, and I had none of these things. So the next level below that was the EB2 NIW. And because my friend had applied for it, that was also, and had gotten it, that was why I applied for that route. So when people sometimes ask me, why didn't you apply for the EB1? That's my whole reason. I don't have a technical reason for it. I didn't think I was a super genius, but then my friend who had a PhD just like me had applied for EB2. So that's why I applied for that. And I recommend, and so if you feel that way, then this is a really good visa type for you to apply for. Now, I know that for certain countries, applying for the EB2 category is like a no-go area because there's so many people that have applied for that visa from those countries. And so usually there's a longer line, longer wait time for those people. And so sometimes they just go into the EB1 category and try to fight for that. I'm originally from Ghana in West Africa. And so, you know, the line is much, much shorter. And so my case went fairly quickly. Now, you probably know a little bit about the EB2 NIW already, but if you do not know, it's a national interest waiver visa. It allows you to self-petition the government to say that based on my research, based on my advanced degree, right, I have work or I have credentials that are in the national interest, and so you should keep me in the United States. That's what that whole visa is about. So what you have to do on your end is prove that you indeed have what it takes to be in the national interest of the United States. For me, that meant I had to gather, and I worked with a lawyer on this. People have asked me, do you think I should pay a lawyer? Do you think I should not pay a lawyer? Personally, I think that working with a lawyer saved me a whole lot of headache. I couldn't have figured this out all on my own. Back when I was applying, I didn't even have programs like this to attend to even tell me what to gather. So having a lawyer was so, so helpful. You may decide after this call that I've told you enough, or you go back and watch the videos that I put on YouTube. You've watched that and you feel like, oh, this is enough for me to go ahead and do it myself. That's on you. I cannot say you should have or not have a lawyer. I can only tell you my experience, and my experience was that having a lawyer saved me a bunch of headaches. Okay, so that's what I'll say about that. So the lawyer really helped guide my process. And so what they had me do, first of all, was gather all my publications. By the time I was done with my PhD, I had about 5 publications. And this was even without me knowing that I would need this later on. So if you are currently in a PhD program, or you're even doing a postdoc right now, try to push to publish, right? Try to push to publish papers, to publish conference abstracts, to publish whatever it is that you can publish, books, book chapters, whatever. So that was the first thing, publications. The second thing were citations. All right. So how many people had cited the work that I was an author on? And let me go backtrack for a second. For the 5 papers, I had 2 first author papers, and 3 of them I was a middle author. So I wasn't a first author on all 5 papers. Okay. All right. So then there came the citations. How many citations, how many people had cited my work? For that, I made sure to create a verified account with Google Scholar. All right. I think there's another service that you can use. It's like escaping my memory right now, but I remember that I used at the time I was a postdoc at University of California, San Diego. So I used my UCSD email to verify my account. They usually like for your email to be associated with an educational institution because it is Google Scholar. So you can't just use your Gmail. So I would go ahead and do that, create your verified account with Google Scholar. And when you do that, you can put in your name and it will pull up all your citations. So when I did that, I was able to, once I had done that, I was able to pull up my name. And then once I pulled up my name, it brought up all the people that had cited my work. And at the time, I was actually kind of shocked because at the time, I think I had 150 citations of my papers. So that was a lot. That was a lot. So that was enough for the lawyers I was working with. So that was the second thing. The third thing was to get research. Somebody said the other one is ResearchGate. Maybe I didn't use ResearchGate though. I just remember using Google Scholar, and the other one was not ResearchGate. Hopefully, I remember during the course of this, but the Google Scholar one was enough though. The third thing I wanted to talk about, so I talked about publications, I've talked about citations. The other thing was to get recommendation letters from individuals within my field. Now, the way that the lawyers told me to do this was to find one. Of course, my advisor wrote me one letter, so that was one, but she knew me. So they said, try to get people that don't know you or who never worked with in the same institution, but who know about work. And so and this is where networking becomes super important. I've had people, I don't know how many people, you can raise your hand if you follow me on LinkedIn, but if you don't, one of the things I talk a lot about on LinkedIn is networking. And sometimes I get a lot of pushback against that because people feel like networking is such a dirty word, right? But this is where networking paid off because I went to conferences while I was a graduate student. I made connections with people who would stop at my posters. I knew about their work. They knew about my work. And so we had those kind of they were not even like tight relationships, but we kind of were acquainted with each other. During this time, I was able to reach out to those people and say, hey, we've never worked in the same institution before. You know about my work and you know the impact it has within this community. Would you be willing to write me a recommendation letter? And they happily said yes. So again, I didn't have to do cold outreach to people I didn't know, because even I remember there was one person who had cited my work a lot, had actually used it in a patent application. And I reached out to them, and that was really strong because using, your work being cited in the patent application was a pretty big deal to me. But I reached out to that person, and that person did not respond to me. But then the people that I had already established some kind of, acquaintance relationship with, because they never worked in the same institution, because they had never been my advisor or co-worker or anything, they fit that bill. And so I was able to reach out to those warm leads and say, could you do that for me? And so they helped me in that regard. And so in the end, I ended up having, I want to say, 4 or 5 recommendation letters. One was from my advisor from graduate school, and then the rest were from these people who I had never done any work with, but who knew about my work and were willing to vouch that my work was in fact within the national interest. So I had those letters, and then I had to also get together all my transcripts and my diplomas. So from the schools, I went to college here. So I came to the US this year. Actually, I would have been in the US 20 years. So I came to college here and then continued on with my PhD. So all my education was here. I know that for some people, they may only have done their PhD here. So you may have to reach out back to your home country to get those documents, and so that you have those on hand. I recommend that you start doing this before you start the process, so you have everything together, so that once you start submitting things, you're not trying to like waste another 6 months looking for things, right? So because I had done everything here, I was able to reach out to the schools easily, get all my transcripts, get my diploma. Actually, I was missing one diploma, but because I had a transcript, that was enough. Get all that together, my educational record. And so those were the major things. And then, of course, because I had been here, I had to, show them any kind of OPT applications I had ever done, my passport, there are things like that, social security number, there are things like little things like that that they asked for. And so I got all of that together. And of course, I included that in the application, the actual application, which that first one is always is it the ICE? I now get it all mixed up. It's been several years now, guys. So forgive me if I'm forgetting so many things. But I did take all of that and include that with my application and submit it. Now, when people ask me about wait times, how much time did it take? I would say that I got in touch with the lawyer in January, and they gave me this whole list of things that I needed to get. So getting in touch with all the people for their recommendation letters, getting my transcripts together, getting everything together, took a few months, okay? Because the people that you may ask for recommendation letters from, they're busy. They're not people that have the time to like sit down and craft one for you all the time. So it took a while. It took a while to find all the other things as well. And so it took a while. That's all I'll say. But anyway, I got in touch with the agency, the lawyer agency in January. And they gave me, I think I ended up paying them whatever their fee was at the end of January. And I took February, March, and April. So 3 months, right, to get everything corralled, everything together. So by the time I sent everything to them, I think it was I want to say end of April of 2018, and they were able to do everything on their end and submit my application by May of 2018. I want to say May or June of 2018. Oh no, 2017. Okay, I'm missing 1 year of 2017. So let's say it was May of 2017, they were able to submit everything because I'd finally gotten everything I needed together. So again, that's why I say that, like, start the process early. Don't wait, don't delay, because it takes a while sometimes to get everything together. Yeah. I remember one person, they were supposed to send me the recommendation and they're like, oh yeah, I'll send it. And then a month later, I reach out to them like, oh my God, I forgot. Let me just get on this, so you have to be on it, or else like people can easily delay you. So when they submitted it in May of 2017, I did not get a response until February of 2018. So let's say that was like 8-9 months. And that was when the first part of my case was approved. So the EB2 has two sides. So the first one is petitioning with all the documentation that I just told you about, that your work is in the national interest. So you have all these things. And the lawyers also, after I submitted all these documents, my citations, my papers, the recommendation letters, my educational history, everything that they had asked me for, they then in turn wrote a very, very nice cover letter summarizing my work, summarizing the impact of the journals that I had published in, summarizing the impact of the number of citations that I had, the people that had written the recommendation letters for me, their positions and what that meant within the community. So they wrote a really nice cover letter, which I want to say, the last time I checked, somebody asked me how many pages that was. I think it was like 10 pages of a cover letter. So it was quite a document, and they submitted that. I didn't hear back. So all that ended up being approved by February of 2018. And then at that point, you have to apply for the change of status. Now they've said, okay, we agree your work is in the national interest. Now you have to adjust your status from being an F1 OPT student to being a permanent resident. I did that in March of 2018. I had the interview, because you do need to have an interview. I had an interview for my permanent residence in November of 2018. So another 9-10 month wait. And I got approved for my permanent residence the end or the end of November or the beginning of December of 2018. So from when the lawyer submitted everything I had to when I finally became a permanent resident, took about a year and a half. But the whole process, right, of me gathering all my papers, of all that, started in January. Remember, I told you that. So it almost took 2 years for that whole process. So you really have to factor all of this in as you get everything together. So that's a little bit about my journey. And I think in me speaking, I've already touched on so many things that you need to start gathering right now. For the second part of the application, of course, you have to do some medical exams. You have to do, did I have to do a background check? I can't remember if I had to, but I do remember the medical exam. I remember having to give my tax documents to show that I was working or something like this. There were quite a few. It wasn't as extensive as the first part of the process. So that ended up going really quickly. Like I said, I was approved in February. By March, I had submitted everything. And it ended up getting approved. So that's a little bit about my journey.
Thank you so much, Gertrude, for sharing how everything went with you on this NIW track. And as you said, things have changed over time, and the process varies from people from some nationalities to others. I totally agree with that. So my question for you is, like, have you ever come across anybody, or in your, among your friends or people who you mentor, who were able to jump on this NIW journey without a PhD? Because I think that's a burning question that's among most graduate students these days.
I know just one person who applied before he was done with his PhD. The subject he was working on, though, was really hot at the time. So I think that contributed. I'm going to tell you what his subject was. His subject was Ebola. And Ebola virus had just been a huge issue in parts of Africa. And so he was able to do that before his PhD ended, and he was approved. Right. So I know one person. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay, I think I will open the floor to our audience to ask their questions. Our first one is Chandni. Chandni, can you unmute yourself to ask your question, please?
Hi, everyone. I'm Chandni, and thank you for the great session. So my question is, and thank you for the great talk. This really helped me a lot because I'm struggling to gather all my documents. I'm in second year of my PhD in public health, and I have worked with CDC Foundation on COVID cases when COVID hit, and now I'm working with HIV positive individuals. So I really don't have any publication. I just am working on the grant with my advisor. So what advice you would give me? Like, I really want to start the process early because I know it's going to take a lot of time. So what advice you have for me, like what documentation I should start gathering if I don't have any publication? Like, I'm working on the publication, but it usually will take a lot of time. So I just want to know some advices as an early PhD student.
Are you a PhD student right now?
Yes, I'm in second year of my PhD.
Okay, so I thought you were a postdoc. So you have a lot of time to publish, right? And so still work on getting those publications, because I always think that that's one of the biggest things, right? Now, I'm not saying that you cannot apply without publications, but you have to work harder to prove your case without publications, right? So now that you're in your second year, really push to get those publications. That's the first thing. The second thing is that if you're helping to write these grants that you're talking about, then try to find a way so that your name goes on that grant application somehow, so that you can show that as proof of like I applied for this grant that was worth this much, and we got the money. Actually, as part of my application, I do remember that there was one grant that we had applied for with my research, and I think that grant was worth $50,000, and I think I was able to use that in my application process. So, you know, you may add that you know, in addition to my publication, whether that's 1 or 2 publications, at least just get 1 publication out. But you can include this and say that, you know, we applied. And sometimes even within the, you know, when you write your papers, at the end of the paper, you may have to state, disclose the funding sources. You know, you can use that phrase and then like go and pull out like from the grantor's website, like this is what this was worth, this is how much we got, and I applied for it and it was used in this publication. So that can be another way to prove, you know, that you did contribute to the body of knowledge within your field. The whole idea really is prove to us that you have contributed in any way to your field and how that impacts the United States, right? So for me, and again, I'm saying all of this to kind of like give you ideas. I can't tell you exactly what to give, but some of these will give you ideas. So my research was on, you know, toll-like receptor 2 signaling in the gut and how this controlled homeostasis of the intestinal barrier. And this is really, really important in diseases like inflammatory bowel disease and Crohn's disease and even colon cancer. So having that understanding, I was able to write, and the lawyers were able to use this in their letters, that this is the burden that these diseases have on the United States. And so it's important that this research is done in this field to reduce the financial burden and the burden that it is on society for these diseases to exist. So again, you can argue your case from what you're working with, you know, COVID patients, you're working with HIV patients, you're collecting all this data. How does that impact? What do these diseases, COVID, right? What COVID shut the whole world down, right? So you want to kind of argue for your case also from that point and find ways, creative ways to do that, especially, you know, if you don't have all the publications. But try, since you're in your second year of your PhD, just work really hard to get those publications. Okay, I hope that was helpful.
Yes, that's a lot helpful. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Gertrude. We have 2 more questions in the chat before I move on to you, Femi. So the first question in the chat is, how do you determine if EB1 or EB2 NIW is the best option for you?
Mm-hmm. If you're a super genius, go for EB1. If you're not a super genius like me, go for EB2. That's the simple thing. But the other thing too is, again, like I mentioned, there are some countries where it's better to apply for the EB1 process. It's a more extensive process than EB2. I didn't go through it myself, so I cannot give you the details. But I think it's a more extensive process. You have to, you know, really prove that you're a genius. But it's easier for certain people from certain countries to apply, right? To apply for those versus the EB2. Again, the EB2 for certain countries, the wait time is like 10, 15 years. I just told you that it took me 1.5 years, you know, because of where I came from. So you want to kind of weigh those questions. Where am I, you know, is there a long wait time? And all of this is listed on the USCIS website, by the way. You get to see kind of these wait times for specific countries and then the rest of the world. So that's really important for you to be up to date with. That's my only answer. I don't have a technical answer for you.
Thank you, Gertrude. No, I agree with you. This is actually, I mean, it's a great question. It's there in everybody's mind. When I started off, I also thought, like, which one should I go for? And to be honest, there's really not one fit everyone kind of an answer for this. It all just depends on your profile, where you're from, how you can, you know, I think establish your case. So I agree with you. It's not that straightforward to answer this. The next, before I actually move on to the next question, we have a lot of people wanting to, you know, talk to Gertrude and have those questions answered. So I would encourage you to maybe keep your questions to 1 or 2 at the most, so that everybody can get a chance. If you have multiple questions, as I can see, there's one in the chat, please pick your topmost question for me so that I know which one you would want to be answered first. Yeah, the next question is from Nidia. Nidia, if you want to ask your questions, you're welcome to unmute yourself, or I can ask it for you. Okay, I think I'll ask it on her behalf. She asks, how many publications is good enough, more or less, and how many citations? And what about not being the first author on these publications?
There's no specific number that the government prescribes. You can have, there are people that have, you see, it depends on your field. There are certain fields where a paper a year is like more than enough. And there are certain fields where I know one of my colleagues who has a doctorate in education, and he was publishing papers like every 2 months or something. You know, it just really depends. I know for my engineering colleagues, sometimes it takes them 2 years to publish a paper. In my field, 1 year to publish a paper was enough. So really it depends on you and how productive you've been publishing wise during your PhD. So there's no prescription. Also, there's no prescription on how many citations you need. There's no prescription. Again, there are people that have even applied for this without publications and have gotten it. The only thing I will say is that more is more. Why? Because I think the fact that I had 5 papers, 2 of them first author and 3 of them being middle author, and the fact that I had over 100 citations by the time I applied was very, very helpful. It gave the lawyers more room to argue my case, right? But then you could have 0 publications, no citations, but your work is so important and you have such good lawyers that they're able to argue your case for you, or you are able to argue your case yourself because you're choosing to not use a lawyer. So I really do think that if I was to recommend, I would recommend that having as many publications as you can is good. But if you finish your PhD without publications, it's not a lost cause. But I do highly encourage you to improve your chances, to give you wiggle room, to give you room to like really argue your case. Publications are going to be one of the major ways that you prove that. So there's no prescription on have 10 publications and 200 citations. There's nothing like that. There's just how well are you going to argue your case?
Thank you, Gertrude. Yes, totally agree on that. Like, we said already, it's just such a gray area of how you can establish yourself as of interest. Our next person in line is Femi.
Okay.
Yeah. Hello.
Hi.
Hi, doctor.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Thank you for all that you do. Thank you for the information, for spreading the love and everything that you've acquired over the years, and the host as well for putting this up. So my question is, I'm in the US presently on a B1, B2 visa, but I've packaged my NIW application I'm from Nigeria. I have everything, all the documents, all the references. I don't have publications, but I've got reports. My area of expertise is tax audit and investigation. And that's a critical area that the US government really, really needs. I've got references from almost 7 professionals and government bodies and agencies. But my first question is, can I submit my application for NIW right here in the US on a B1, B2 visa, which is expiring in 2 months? Or I should just go for the O1A visa because the evidence is a bit similar?
Personally, I don't like the O1 visa. Why? Because it's not really an immigrant visa. It's just a visa that says you can stay in the United States and work. When it expires and that's it. There's no path to citizenship on that visa. But when you are a permanent resident and you want a path to citizenship, it's possible. Unless you don't want that path, then I would say go for it. But if you've done all the work for an NIW, then why don't you just apply for an NIW? Don't make it more complicated than it is. I always find that people end up making this, it's a simple process, but we end up overcomplicating things. Don't do that. You have what you have, submit it and see what happens. It's the same amount of work. So why, apply for this one I just don't trust things like this. We've all seen recently how people have been laid off jobs, and all of a sudden their H-1B visas are about to expire. All of a sudden they've had to go back home. There's nothing wrong with going back to your home country, but maybe for some reason, for now, at this season of your life, you want to work here for a season and do what you need to do. So just apply for the NIW. Personally, I don't like the O1. This is just a personal preference. But if you think that's what you want to go for your own reasons, you can. It's the same amount of work. So why not just go the permanent resident path? That's my response.
Yes, I want to go for the permanent resident path, but like I said, there's something called dual intent, because
is your visa dual? The B1 is a Vista visa, right?
Yes. So basically, if I put in an NIW for green card application, I-140 from here, it shows I have ulterior motives. It shows, when I came in, I declared I wanted to come to visit, and I have to go back to my home country. So when I try to flip that and submit an NIW green card application while in the US, it shows I have a different motive. And I'm thinking maybe the USCIS could frown upon that, because they said you should apply from your home country, apply the NIW from your home country, and go to the nearest US embassy to actually do your paperwork before coming here, but not from within the US.
Yeah, I have my own opinions on that, and I don't want to offend anybody, so I will not share what my opinions are. Because what I'll say to you, you may not like. So I'm not going to share that. But what I will say that is more PC, so that everybody will be happy and not hate me, is I don't like the O1. So if you want to apply for that and get dual intent and kind of be cute about it, you could do that. Or you could do the really right thing, which would be to apply from your home country. Now, again, that's why I said people would hate me for saying that. But if you don't want to get in trouble, if you're highly qualified, I know people that have applied from their home countries and it has worked out for them, right? So you could do that and it will work. You already have everything. Just submit it and be in your home country, right? Now you're going to apply for this O1, kind of be, it's just too cute, and I don't like cutesy, underhanded things. So that's the only thing I will say, is, whatever is sitting well with your conscience or not sitting well with your conscience, go with the right decision, because ultimately, I always say that there was a movie I was watching. Let me just say this and then I'll stop talking, because I think this is, Femi, this is a decision. This is something where you know what to do, but you want me to kind of give you an answer, and I don't want to give you an answer, right? So, so my thing, I don't think, is your PhD from the US?
No, I don't have a PhD, but I ticked all the boxes for the NIW evidence. Okay,
gotcha. Somebody was saying if your PhD is in the US, something. Anyway, I just was going to say that there was a movie I was watching and somebody said something I've never forgotten, that I always use that in all my presentations. I said, never underestimate the gamesmanship of the US government. If they want to find you out for something, they will find you out. They may not have the time, but sometimes I have seen where situations have come back to bite people. I don't want that to happen to you. So choose the right path. Okay. I personally don't like O1, so I don't recommend people go that path. I recommend the EB2 and to do it the best way that you can. If you're right, if a visa will complicate your situation. So just decide what you want to do.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you, Gertrude. Our next person is Sai. His question is in the chat. Sai, I know you have a list of like 7 questions. Unfortunately, we cannot ask all of those. So do you have a preference, or I can go with the first one?
Yes. Yeah, you can go with the first one and fourth one.
Okay, we'll address your first one since we're running a little short of time. If nobody else
before you
after that.
Sorry to interrupt. Before before our guests can answer all these questions, I just want to give an insight into who I am, what I do, what I am not. I'm a construction engineer. I'm not a licensed professional engineer. I work on Department of Transportation related bridge projects in Illinois and Missouri for a private engineering firm. I do not have a PhD. I've done only my master's in the United States. It's a non-thesis. I don't have any research papers or citations or publications or conference papers. I only satisfy maybe one for sure. The second one is the license and certification. I don't know if I completely satisfy that. The third criteria I'm trying to satisfy is membership in professional organizations. I don't know how I can show proof of that. That's what I want to get advice on. Thank you.
Thank you. And since you're on,
Sure.
you're unmuted yourself, feel free to ask your first question.
Yes, you can ask your first question.
What government-related websites or resources or data did your attorney recommend providing as an underlying proof to USCIS that your work is in the interest of national US economy? Hence, it is beneficial for them to waive off a labor certification. How did you prove one prong out of the three-prong Danasar test?
So they what they did was they used a lot of my research that I had done myself. They didn't really depend on a whole lot of government websites. And I wish I had printed the letter so that I could read portions of it to you. But essentially what they did was they went to the organization. So the organizations within the medical field that have data on particular diseases. And so for, the Society of Hematology or the Society for Gastrointestinal Disease or whatever. So they're these organizations. You also have the NIH website, right? The National Institutes of Health. And this is specifically for my degree, right? So they were able to leverage these resources and say, according to the Society for ABCD and according to the NIH, right? This is a disease burden for this particular condition in the United States. This is how much it costs the US every day or every year to treat these illnesses. And this is why this research is really important to relieve us of that burden. So they were able to use my publications, they were able to use the NIH website, they were able to use the resources found on these organizations, which are recognized, right? Recognized medical organizations. They were able to use the data from these places. So I would say that those are where they pulled that data from. And then they were also able to use, in improving the impact of my work, they were also able to use the impact of the journals I had been published in or been cited in, right? This is public information. They're able to know what the impact factor is, how many people read it, and so on and so forth. This is public information. So again, they're able to pull from those journals information and then share that. And again, that's why everybody's case is going to be different, because mine is in the biomedical sciences, you are working in engineering, so it may be different.
Thank you, Gertrude. Our next person is Sarjan.
Morning, good evening, wherever in the world are you. Thank you so much for your talk. It was really, really insightful, and I took a couple of notes. I will use them, but I just have a question regarding the publications. So as a postgraduate researcher currently and about to begin my PhD this fall in the US, I already have a couple of publications working in European institutions. And I was just wondering whether those will also count in the long run for the EB2, or is it only mandatory to get publications that come out of my PhD in the US?
No. So your publications so far, anything you have so far that can have, and if you published a paper let's say you lived in Tanzania, you published a paper on malaria, and you are able to show that your work, right, your work in malaria, you're able to link it to something here within the United States, and that's why your work is important, it's fine. It's not, your paper doesn't have to necessarily be published by a US journal or by, it just has to be published work. It was really published, right? It's been cited. It's useful. You're able to argue that this subject is important, or there's an adjacent subject that is important that you you can relate your work back to. So it's a European institution, it's fine. It's an Asian institution, it's fine. It's an African institution, it's okay. It's a publication, and you are going to argue your case based on the work that you've done before. It doesn't matter where in the world you did that work.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gertrude. Do we have anybody else on the chat? Not yet. I have one question for you, Gertrude. And I face this question from a lot of people. There are, a section of people who are very active on LinkedIn, and they basically share insights or articles, or talk about things from their area of expertise, or they even have podcasts. So my question to you is, does that in any way contribute to your NIW application?
So you're talking about media, having, media publication. I mean, you could use, I don't know. I may not be the best person to ask this question. I think the best person to ask this question would be an immigration lawyer. But in my mind, again, argue about your work. You're trying to prove that your work is in the national interest, whatever that work is. Show why, right? So you have artists. Let me just step back. There's a category of EB1 that's for artists, right? We could easily say that music is not important to the well-being of the United States, right? But obviously there is a category for them. So they were able to argue that my music is important. So how much more you? I'm not saying that music is not important, by the way. I'm just using that as an example. So how much more you, who is doing something in taxation, or doing something with engineering, and doing something with science, that where we see those raw numbers, right? Those hard numbers that you can prove. So don't get in your own way about it. If you can, in my mind, I feel like a podcast or LinkedIn post, those are supportive. They're not the main thing. Main thing is like really showing how is your academic work, especially for EB2, because EB2 NIW, remember, it's like there's this section of it that's for advanced degree holders. So whether that's a master's degree or a PhD, and you have to really show that this is my work and this is why you should keep me here. So you could, but I wouldn't use that. Yeah, sure, Ayantka. It's a gray area again. There are no hard and fast rules here. So you can use it as supportive, but I personally wouldn't use it as my main argument. Yeah,
that makes sense. I mean, it's all about how well you can establish that you're necessary. I think we could go back to Sai. He has a few more questions, and so nobody else came up.
Okay.
Before I'll prioritize. I can pay annual subscription for American Society of Civil Engineers. Does that count as an acceptable membership to prove the third criteria? Or what kind of membership will satisfy the third criteria?
And I've forgotten all the criteria. So remind me what the third criteria is.
Membership in professional organizations, professional license or certifications in your field, acceptable degree. I satisfy the degree part. I don't know if they only count PhDs. No. I only have a non-thesis, non-research master's.
That's fine. Yeah, you have a master's degree. That's what's important. Yes, so I think that you already kind of satisfy that. But yeah, if you're a paying member of an organization that is recognized, then yes, you could use that as extra, as extra proof. I would agree with that. Yeah.
So by just paying a membership fee, that is acceptable?
Well, I was not part of any organization, and so I didn't have to prove that. Okay. So yes, I was not part of any organization. So if you feel, but this is why I think so far I hope that by the end of this, people will realize that, the people adjudicating the cases, they're people too. And they're just making these decisions based on what you're able to prove, right? So now you have this master's degree in engineering. You've been working in Illinois and Missouri. You've been working with this private firm. This private firm can vouch for you, right? If you decide that you want to pay for this civil engineering organization, that's wonderful, right? But I can also tell you that I wasn't part of any organization, and I still met all the prongs because the lawyers decided to argue that case that I had all the prongs. So you could be a member of that organization. It could help, but you have to weigh, like, okay, what do I really, if I want to satisfy all of these things, do I have at least one thing in all of these prongs? Yes, let's move on and not make it more complicated than it is, you know.
Two more
So
priority questions.
you could. Yeah, so go ahead.
What is acceptable as other comparable evidence?
Other comparable evidence. So again, this will also depend on how you have been an engineer for how many years?
5.5 and counting.
Great. How many projects have you worked on roughly?
Research projects or construction projects?
Construction projects.
5+.
Okay. Describe those construction projects.
Facade and roof restoration for a men's health shelter on First Avenue in Manhattan, a school project in New Jersey, a park project in New Jersey, a police station project in New Jersey, an athletic field in New Jersey, and one bridge project in Michigan, Detroit, one road project in Detroit. And I was the project engineer for the government on a sidewalk project in Detroit, Michigan. And I restored two roofs for Port Authority of New York, New Jersey, near Harlem Tunnel, one on Manhattan and Jersey City side, one for JFK Airport.
Okay. What does these projects that you just described, what does
Yes.
that provide for the people that use these buildings?
Protection from weather.
And what? And it's safety, right? It says you are providing
Yes.
a safety service to the United States, including a governmental organization, right? Including a governmental organization. You've described it. So that is your evidence, right? You have paperwork to show that you were the project engineer, you were this, you were this, you were that on these projects. That's your proof. So gather all of that. Think about how many people were impacted by these projects you worked on. Is it in the hundreds of people, thousands of people? If something went wrong with one of the buildings that you worked on, how many people could be impacted or killed by that, right? That's your proof. So when you're thinking about your work, don't just think about just a project, think about the impact that it also has on society, on the people that may use that work. That's what we are talking. That's how you prove it. Not just your degrees and everything. That's all that important. It's all the surface stuff. But now show me the impact of it. And you kind of have talked about that. So that's where you want to argue. You want to argue from.
I think
Thank
this
you.
question is also applicable to a
I'm
lot of
sorry
people.
to interrupt you. We have another person, so
Oh,
I
okay.
have to prioritize.
Oh.
Thank you so much, though. This is the last question we'll take since we have a hard stop in 4 minutes. This is from Jaita. She says, what if a publication where I'm a third author gets more citations than my solo authored publication? Or I think she means first author publication.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many citations are on the middle one or on the first one. It's just the total number of citations. Again, I think a lot of us are like nitpicking and like picking up hairs. Be careful not to do that. Think about the impact of your work. The impact of your work is you were the middle author on a paper that got cited 100 times. Now you were the first author on a paper that got cited 20 times. But how many citations do you have altogether? 120. You go, girl. You go. No, self-citation doesn't really count, but usually they don't really show whether it's self-citation or No. Usually I think Google Scholar actually picks out the ones that are not cited by you. So you're fine if you're using Google Scholar. Somebody asked, does GPA matter? I saw that question.
I did ask that.
No, not really. Community engagement, I would say, yeah. Honor societies, yes, you could put that in there. But, you know, if again, like this is where I don't like being cute. So I wasn't part of any of these organizations and I still got my permanent residence approved, right? So if you don't want to really join out these organizations, then don't join them. But if you think that you want to join them because you definitely have something to contribute, then why not? I'm just paying for an organization just to put in an application. I don't know. I'm not a big fan. But if you want to do that, that's up to you. But GPA, nobody cares about your GPA. We are the ones that, for your own ego, of course, but I don't remember putting anything about GPA on there. But community engagement, I would say absolutely.
Thank you so much, Gertrude. That was really, really very helpful. The whole session, I think, was really helpful, especially the main message that I got out of this was find out how your work is going to impact the country. So no matter which area you're from, what you work in, what your background is, if you can establish that, I think that's where the battle is won. Thank you so much, Gertrude, for spending time with us today, sharing your insights. And I have shared Gertrude's LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with her. She's an amazing person. And we also have, like this, Aditi has also started Slack channel where, you know, you can connect with people who are on the same journey as you are in terms of whether it's EB1 or EB2, whichever you fit in best. And I'm going to put that link here. Feel free to join the Slack channel. We have sub channels for lawyer recommendations, for, you know, collaborations and recommendations and stuff like that. So please feel free to join there. And before I wrap up this event, I'm going to share the event for our next session. And we will have Elena Talboy, who will be talking to you about how you could develop and own your expertise in grad. So if you're a grad student, or even if you're somebody without a PhD and or someone very early in a career, I think this will be a great, great session for you to join, because that's what I talk to you about, how you could prepare yourself for your green card journey. So my apologies. I dropped off. So sorry. But yes, that's the session that you might want to join. Registration will probably start on Sunday, which is tomorrow. But keep an eye on the LinkedIn channel. That's where Aditi shares the Slack channel and her LinkedIn page, where she shares everything about her forthcoming sessions. And again, thank you everyone for joining us today. Thank you, Gertrude, again for this amazing session, and hope to see you guys in the next session.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.